To the SorareData Strategy Show. I am Andrew Laird. You can find me as Lairdinho on Sorare, joined as always on this Friday by PSU fans too, Sean Newsham. Sean appears to be coming to us from heaven. I mean, the light's behind, and it's like I'm going to have to take blame for this as well. Apparently, with the time that somehow the sun perfectly comes in through your window. But hey, Sean.
I am an angel from above, Laird. What can I say? I mean, the dogs. I literally am hearing someone unpackaging something outside, so I'm sure the dogs will let theirselves be known. But yeah, I mean, I'm ready to go. We tried to get rid of the lighting issues behind me for the last like 10 minutes, but it wasn't happening. So we just said, who cares?
Yeah, we promised that we actually did try.
We did
to fix that, but
we gave an effort of some sort to fix it. It just did not.
Right. Thank you to everybody who has joined us today. Looks like Shriram got in first from Austin, Texas, I assume is Texas, or that Austin. We've got Russell Copter from Vienna, Mike Baston here, ready to get drunk on our Carlos Hill drinking game. Shriram was worried he was going to be drunk 19 minutes in. I don't know if it'll take that long, to be honest. 19 minutes, a long time before we get our 10th or 12th Carlos Hill mention. But yeah, a few others: Mayo, Javier Perez, Caspar. Oh, Quinny's here. Nice to see you guys. Thank you all for joining us. If you guys wouldn't mind hitting the like button below already, surely you've liked what you've seen so far. But
I'm at 0 so far. So
you are at 0. That's true. You're right.
See, I haven't started yet.
We haven't done individual counting as a team effort on the Carlos Hill count. Apologies for yet another one. But yeah, today we are talking about players who are very much unlike the New England Revolution superstar. And I feel like the thumbnail that I used bothered a few people because there have been a number of people who have started talking about this topic already, which is always great to see because it helps liven our conversation. But Sean, is there any initial response that you had to the guy? Well, let me rephrase. You're already pulling back. And I'm going to call you out on this right away because we were very much in agreement. We had a whole conversation, and then you DM me last night and you were like, you know what? He might not be as bad as I thought. And I'm like, oh, here we go. He's pulling back. How do you really feel at this point?
It's more so there's someone that just should have been the poster boy that's clearly worse and clearly the worst. Quinny and I actually talked about him yesterday. I don't know if you listened. I don't know if Quinny's show with me from yesterday is out yesterday, but we talked about this player a little bit yesterday. The person that was pictured. I mean, do I want his card? No, not particularly. But if we're not putting up, like we discussed how we were going to go about this, and the idea was sort of like if the player was undecided as of now. Like, for example, people in the comments were talking about us bringing up like Cherokee. Well, we can't really bring up Cherokee because he's like unknown. We don't know if Cherokee's going to suck when he actually gets a consistent amount of playing time. So like we said, we're like, can we really discuss those type of players? So we didn't want to do that. So the person that we mentioned was Dusan Vlahovic, and he's not great. Like his scoring isn't great. He's a total non-AA decisive dependent striker, but we both don't think he's going to score that many goals because we just don't think Juve is good enough to produce that much, which therefore makes his price tag of, let's call it 3 ETH, I guess, right now, because that like his floor is like 3.5. Last sale was like 2.5. So we'll call him like 3. So like, is he worth 3? No. However, he's still a 22-year-old good high-end prospect. So like my point is more so I just don't know if we should be including him per se when we're not including other people like that. Whereas Laird is adamant that he sucks and he wants to bring him up. But like,
No.
I'll clarify this too though. Like, so Laird is adamant that he sucks and that no one should have him, which that's Laird's take, not mine.
That is a ridiculous misrepresentation.
But like, is it a card I would want? No. If I won the card, I would sell it and I would do different things for it. But I think we're going to talk about, so the main part of our discussion today is getting bang for your buck from an SO5 perspective. And we're going to talk about players that you're spending X amount on and their production you could get for a significantly cheaper price point.
Right. So this actually is kind of a continuation of a conversation we had last week where we were like, there's an expensive way to play, and then there is a more efficient way to play in terms of SO5. And I think one of the pushbacks that we get on some of our analyses is, well, this guy's going to be worth a lot more in 3 years. Like he's going to be a star, and giving up on him now is crazy. And the only response I have to that is like, we're not trying to win 3 years from now. Like we're trying to develop strategies that help us win cards now that we can either win a Vlahovic and sell him, or win other cards that we might actually use. And there are certain cards that come with a premium because of either the hype that the player has, the team that he's on, expectations of what will happen one day. But like, we're not scored on what's going to happen in a year or two. Like we're scored on what happens now. And what we were discussing about Vlahovic was less about whether he is a good player or not. Like, I think there's a general belief he's a very, very good player. The difference is he worth 2.5 ETH when you're trying to play U23, rare pro, whatever you're going to use his rare card for? Like, does that use of capital give you an advantage over other people because we're all trying to score more than everybody else? And based on how he scores and the setup that he's in and his price, we were like, no, he's not worth it. Like, is he a good player? Absolutely. And there's no questioning that. But like what I mentioned to you yesterday, I was like, betting on him, meaning buying his card, is betting on Juventus. Like, if you think that Juve are going to score a ton of goals next year, he's going to be like the reason for it. The problem is that they were 11th in goals this year in Serie A, and there's really nothing like things that they could sign other people and that helps, but like there's very little that makes me think that they're going to go from, I think it was 57 goals that they scored just this year to 77. And I think you need to score 77 in order for you to get enough out of their lead striker at 2.5 ETH for a rare card.
I think you need more. I think you need like 100.
100 goals?
How many goals do you think they need for Vlahovic to produce what you would need out of him at that price point for like this upcoming season?
Well, I don't even.
How many? Well, here's a better question. How many
decisives, really?
How many decisives do you think Vlahovic needs to pay off? I have a number in my mind.
At 2.5 ETH?
Yeah.
40?
Yeah, I think it's 40 to 50. So if you need 40 to 50 decisives, I mean, how much involvement is he really going to have? Is he going to have a 50% involvement, or is he going to have like a 60% involvement rate? Because that seems difficult to me to really wrap my head around, that he's going to have a 50% involved or 60% involvement rate on 77 goals. I do think they could get better. I agree with you right now that the signs of them getting better is like what they have currently would not indicate that they're going to go out there and score 80 to 100 goals. But
right.
My issue is like, so a guy like him, he just doesn't have an AA game. So in order for you to get like a game that is good, and what, obviously if someone scores 65, that's fine. But you really need like 80, 85s to really get up there and fight for the high end stuff, which if you're paying 2.5, 3 ETH for a card, you need to get up there for the high end stuff. You're not going to pay off that card over the season with like tier 3s. So you need to be able to get up there near podiums multiple times. So you're saying he needs basically to get 2 to 3 decisives in a game for him to really get to that like 80, 85 to 90 point type range where he needs to get. So if you're scoring 20 decisives in a season, you might get one game where you have like 3 decisives. That's just not going to cut it. You need like 40 decisives so that you can hit like a spot where you get like 2 or 3 decisives like 20% of the time. You get a decisive another 30% of the time. And then 50% of the time, you're just not going to be that good, which is understandable. But like, yeah, you look at this, like, I mean, obviously sample's small and it wasn't super productive, but half the games kills your lineup. The next 35, 40%, he was like mediocre, where it's like, all right, he got a decisive and then just kept the lineup alive. That's it. And then 2 games, he got 80, 87 of the 13 or so he played. But is he really going to be able to do that? So like if you just sort of like triple this situation or turn it into a long run, like let's just pretend this was replicated 3 times, which basically would give you like the view of a season.
Yep.
That would give you like 6 games where he actually gets you a good score, give you like 13, 14 where he has like an okay score where the lineup's not fully dead. And then the other half of the time, the other 20 some games, your lineup's just stone dead. So for me, it's like if you're paying 2.5, 3 ETH for a card, you really don't want a guy that you're getting there like 10% of the time, 40% you're keeping the lineup alive, and then 50% of the time you're just dead. You want a guy that's like 25% of the time I'm smashing, 50, 60% of the time I'm keeping my lineup alive, and then 10 to 15% dead, not 50.
Yeah, I think the other thing that a lot of people overlook. Oh, let me rephrase. They don't even overlook. They focus on it, but they're looking at it the wrong way. So he has Champion Europe eligibility also, obviously with Juventus. Like,
Yeah.
so like, oh, I could play him in Champion Europe, but he's not even good enough for that either.
No.
So like that's sort of the problem, is that like he's coming up short on in both competitions, and like even if he improves, like the all around score likely doesn't, or if it does, it comes from like attacking, from shots on target, basically. Like he's not a creator. And so you're still just kind of spending a lot for coming up short. And so I did, not to like compare these two players in the way I'm about to, but like I recently sold Raul Rui Diaz. And the reason I did it was because in order for Rui Diaz to get like 80 points, he needs like multiple decisives.
Yeah.
And that's, it just doesn't happen that often. And like 67 points like helps, but it doesn't help enough for the prices that you have to pay, at least for Vlahovic. Like 2.5 ETH just seems like a lot to me. And so we kind of talked about this last week, and it kind of was run with in some conversations I had on Twitter today about Fleming. And we were like, that if you're going to spend 2.5 ETH, like, and you're like, I'm not going to get him, meaning Vlahovic, like, you don't have to just spend 2.5 ETH for one other player. Like the idea is that if you have multiple options, now you can play good matchups. If one of them happens to get on a hot streak, then you can play that guy. But like, this is a game based on budgets, and it's like, it's not a salary cap game, but it basically is a salary cap. It's basically a budget game based on your own budget. And if you're somebody who doesn't have like a massive budget, this 2.5 ETH just seems like not a great use of resources. I'll put it that way.
Yeah, so Soderbrad brings up a good point. The issue is he's just wrong about it, but it's a good point, and it's sort of where we were going to go, I think, with the discussion. So he says Lewandowski only hits about 40. 40 might be on the high side in trying to determine value. That's actually wrong. Lewandowski last year, if you just look at Bayern, had 55. He had 55 decisives. I just counted, give or take one, like I might have screwed up one. But like, so Lewandowski had 55 last season for Bayern. And if you look at his L40, it's 67. Is 67 good? Yes, 67 is fantastic. So he had 67 L40 on a best team period that he could be on. Couldn't be on another team. He has a 67 L40 with 55 decisives last year for Bayern. So if you're cutting off, let's say we don't think Vlahovic can hit 40. We don't think that's realistic. Like, we think his realistic outcome is like 20. Let's just call it 27, right? So if we're calling Vlahovic at 27 to 30, that cuts in half what Lewandowski's return was. And if you look at them in terms of like what they're going to get from an AA, they're the same player. Lewandowski had a 7.9 AA. Vlahovic had a 7.6 AA. So Vlahovic is slightly worse. That's fine. So you're looking at Vlahovic, like, let's pretend, just for the sake of argument for Vlahovic, let's pretend his L40 is 58. Vlahovic's L40 is 58. So let's give him the benefit of the doubt and say that he remains at a 58 going forward average. It's just not good enough for 2.5 to 3 ETH card. even if he's hitting a 58 average. Like, you really need a guy to be in the mid 60s if you're paying that much currently to realistically play. So it goes back to your point. Like, he's not good enough to play in Champ Europe. He's not good enough to play in U23. He's not good enough to play in Global, in all the rare pro divisions. So effectively, you're paying like 2.5, 3 ETH to just sort of burn him in D4, where like you're just playing him because he's a body, which I could go buy like Carl Toko Akambi for 10% his price point and get the same return. So it's more so from that perspective than it is from the other perspective. Now the reason I say I'm not going to burn him as bad as Laird will burn him is that he's 22. He could take a step up. Like, to be honest, who makes good sense as a Lewandowski substitute would be Vlahovic.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think the conversation is very different if he was at Bayern.
Correct. If he was at Bayern, you'd be like, all right, this is a really good, strong, solid option. The issue is he's at Juve. We would expect him to at least be at Juve through the rest of this year. So it's like, I'm not going to fully just destroy him because I don't think it's worthwhile. For my personal game, and I think for SO5 perspective, you'd be much better used spending that 2.5, 3 ETH elsewhere. I think that you're just going to get a better player. Like, realistically speaking, you're going to get a better Champ Europe and U23 forward for that price point. Like, I think if you're looking at that.
I mean, you have like a multi-hundred ETH gallery, and if you want him, you'd sell him.
I think I would sell him. I think if I won Vlahovic, I would sell him.
Yeah.
I think. Like, I'm saying that like with 80% certainty. If I wanted him started really hot, I would probably consider keeping him. It would really depend on what the situation was around my U23 forwards, I think.
I think what would realistically happen is if you didn't sell him, you would go like 5 or 6 game weeks when you realize that he was never a consideration for your priority lineups. And you're like, I'm sitting on a 2.5 ETH card in Global All-Star rare. And
I've done that. I've done that with cards where I'm like, why I haven't used you in like a month, and like I should be using you. Like, it would be like a player where it's like their matchups were good, and I'm just not really using you. I'll give an example. Like, I sold the card, but it's a good card, and like I would love to still have it, but it just didn't make sense for me. So like, I had a Virgil van Dijk rare, and every week I was like, I would get down to gas 4 and be like, all right, I guess I'm going to throw Virgil van Dijk in here. And I'm just like, why am I doing this? And the reason is not because Virgil van Dijk's a bad player. Like, his card's great. I wish I had his card. But my D3 stack in Champ was always an inner stack. So like, he's not on inter. So therefore, like, it didn't really work.
Yeah.
And then my D4 lineup was just not usually involving him. So I was just like, I was looking, I'm like, I just can't justify having him. It just doesn't make sense. So I sold him a while ago at like 1.8. Obviously, he's worth more now, and he's a smash. Like, he's one of the best defenders in Champ Europe. But it's just like, it's a guy like that. Like, you could have Vlahovic, and I would imagine like last season, if I had Vlahovic, I would have played him like maybe once a month, period. Not even like every week in D4. Like, I'd probably play him like once a month. So like, that type of player, like, it's hard to just blast. And it's not even that. It's also like, I don't see how with where the matrix is, he becomes good.
Mm-hmm.
He has like one out to become good, and that is be Robert Lewandowski. And like, is he going to be that? Probably not. Could he? Sure, but like, it's unlikely. So I'm just looking at it. So I look at it like, all right, he's not that productive now. I don't really see how he can be an ultimate smasher in the future. So therefore, I'm not that worried about it. That's like what all we talk about with like buying and selling cards. Like, I will not generally sell a card if it's like, this guy could be good. So it's like Cherokee. Like, we talk about Cherokee. Like, Cherokee has not had a run in the team that is like realistic, that you're like, man, Cherokee's going to suck no matter what if he plays. You look at it and like, Cherokee, like, he had a few games last year where he produced very few starts, but on some of those starts, he had like a 20, 25 AA and ended up with 78, 90 points. So like, looking at Cherokee, it's like, could he be good if he starts? Sure. Like, looking at his starts, he generally is at least reasonable in those games. So it's a guy like that. Like, I would struggle to sell like a Cherokee type. Whereas like Vlahovic, like, I look at Vlahovic and I'm just like, I just don't know if you can realistically produce the goods in the current matrix.
Yeah. So yeah, you brought up one of my favorite players here to discuss. I think the benefit that anyone has with who owns a Cherky card is we don't know yet.
Yeah,
And so you could just keep holding on that. And you're like, nah, he could be awesome. And we know that Vlahovic is good, but we also know that we know his situation. So, and I think too many people are focusing on like a 5% outcome that he scores 40 goals next year or has 40 decisives.
correct.
And it's okay to speculate that players are going to be really good, but it's really tough to spend. Like, it's almost like you're already spending for the 40 decisives. And so it's almost like your upside is capped because, like, I guess if he has 40 decisives, he'll be more expensive. It's not like he can't get up in price if he like dominates. But we can't ignore that it's a 5% outcome. And so Cherky, like I said, like we don't know. Like he could be really good. He's younger, and so I get holding him. I think what some people need to really think more about when they buy guys like Cherky is how long do I have to wait for this upside? And like people who have cards like this are not going to sell at like the first time that he goes on a run. Like if Cherky, I don't know how expensive he got. It's probably comically high now that I've said that. Oh, so 1.8 is like his ceiling. I don't think that's actually that crazy. But like if he gets to 2.5, like people who have him aren't selling at that point. And like that's sort of like so they have longer to like appreciate the upside, they'll play him. But like when do you think that's actually going to happen? And if you're looking to buy a card like this now, like do you think that the point 0.9 or 1 ETH that it takes to get Cherky now, if reasonably he is a regular player and good enough to consistently be in U23 lineups that are competitive, if that's like 2 years from now, is buying for an ETH now worth it? And I don't know if it is.
I talked to Quinny and I talked about this a bit yesterday too. So my personal thoughts on guys like this, and I'm talking, I like my projects. Like I will buy cheaper project guys that like I think can be good. And my process with them is I buy them for dirt cheap. Um, I buy them for like as cheap as I can get it. I'm not that worried about whether or not they are a gonna smash or not in the near future. So like a good example of like a guy that I bought, I have a couple examples. So like I bought Mario Stroikens from Anderlecht. Okay. So I paid 0.23 ETH for his super rare. Like, let's see, 2 months ago. So 2 months ago, I bought his super rare for 0.231 ETH. So my viewpoint on I wanted an auction. I'm not sure if it's showing up. I won it 2 months ago. I'm probably that one.
Oh, there it is. Yeah.
So I bought the Stroikens. Like if Stroikens becomes a player, awesome. Like that would be a great situation for me. If he doesn't, I spent 0.231 ETH on his super rare. Not his rare, his super rare. If I wanted to go resell it right now, I could probably get at least half an ETH for it. More. I mean, if his rare is selling for 0.166, I can get
Sure.
probably 0.6 ETH on it. And
Yep.
then another guy that I bought was Luca Oyen, who I'm a
You
big
love this guy.
I love Luca Oyen. I think
He actually plays though.
he does, but when I bought him, he didn't. And I paid 0.349 ETH for his super rare. Again, his super rare. So, and like neither of these guys have shown whether or not they can be good or not be good. And I bought this a year ago. So yeah, like it was a long time ago.
Yeah.
So
He's at ETH now.
my view on projects and sort of like guys like this, I'm paying really cheap for. Like I'm not paying very much for it. I'm trying to think of if I have any others that I can think of. And we talked to Nellis about it. Like Nellis loves these type of guys, but Nellis likes paying like 2 ETH for these type of guys. And I'm like, I'm not interested in paying like a substantial amount for the Flyers. I'm willing to pay 0.2, 0.3 ETH. And then if they spend, like I could buy 10 guys like this. If one of them come out, I'm breaking even. If two of them come out, I'm making a profit. 3, 4 come out, I'm smashing. So the Nuhun card that I got thanks to Perez's tip, like that's another good option. I paid, I don't even remember, like 0.2 something for his super rare. So again, like I'm paying this for a super rare of a guy that if he really becomes good, like I'm probably going to have like a 1 to 2 ETH card. So like I would rather buy it on stuff like this. So my view on cards like Cherokee, Gavi, Pedri, a lot of cards like that, my view is I will win them and then not sell them. So like that's sort of how I get my exposure to cards like that, because I won a Gavi. You and I talked about when I won the Gavi, I was upset. I didn't want to win the Gavi.
You were so pissed.
And I'm gonna sell this card. Luckily, it was one of those days where it took for. I might have listed him. I don't remember if I ever listed him or not. But then as I thought about it more as the day went on, I think maybe I did list it. And I pulled it down at like 4 a.m. because I was thinking about it as I was laying in bed, and I was just like, I'm not gonna do it. But I thought about it.
I was up late at night thinking of my Gavi rare card.
I was, and I actually, did you see the other day? I had a nightmare, so everyone will appreciate this. I had a nightmare where like I bought a card for 24 ETH off the market instead of 0.24 that it was supposed to be, and I like didn't even have that much ETH on the platform, but somehow it went through, and I was just sitting there like depressed in my nightmare state. That happened, but so everyone will appreciate that I was having a nightmare about Sorare.
It's gonna be funny when people start posting cards literally for 0.24, hoping that 24.
Exactly. And then so like my thought process is that I'm using SO5 to win me cards that I view as like long-term high-end type projects, because I'm not going to go and spend 2 ETH on like a total nothing burger card that I can't really play anymore. So I'm going to go look through some of the cards I've won. And this is also, it's also a difficulty, and it's a dependent on your gallery size thing, right? Me spending 0.2 ETH on a card, or like, so like I bought Oyen and I bought Stroikens. They each cost me like 0.2 ETH. It's much more different for me to spend that than it is for you to spend that. And It's much more different for you to spend that than it is for someone with like a 3 ETH gallery. Like if you have a 3 ETH gallery, you just do not really have the luxury to do stuff like that per se. Whereas obviously there's more ability for me to do that than there is other people. But again, like that's like if you're winning a Vlahovic and you just have a card that you can sell for 3 ETH, well, you can get a lot more bang for your buck out of the 3 ETH if you have a smaller gallery than, like for me, like if I invest 3 ETH in my gallery, it might not be that beneficial. Whereas like if you invest 3 ETH in your gallery, it's gonna be huge. Whereas if someone with a 3 ETH gallery invests 3 ETH into their gallery, it's gonna be massive. So it's like one of those things, like I have more of a flexibility to sort of sit on them. But like other cards that I've sort of won like that I viewed as sort of like long-term possible projects. Like I won an Enzo Fernandez. And I'm just like, yeah, I'm not gonna do anything with him because he seems like he could be really good. So I'm gonna keep that card, see what happens with him. I won the Gavi card. Yeah, it worked out really well. I won Gavi, and I'm just like, yeah, I'm gonna keep the Gavi. It makes more sense for me to hold on to that card. I won Gvicha Kvaratskhelia, which I think that was a much better pronunciation than I've been doing with him. But I won him. I'm like, I'm going to hold him because why not? And now I think he's probably doubled in price, and he's been really good for Georgia during this international window. He helped me win a card the other day. Yeah, like so for Georgia, this international window, he's got 85, 85, 78. Wow. So he's been like really good on this window as a 20-year-old midfielder. So like it's just cards like that. That's sort of my viewpoint on like how I'm going about getting exposure to younger type expensive cards. I just win them, and then I'm not going to sell them if I do win them, but I don't really go out and look to buy those type of cards.
But even the cards like Stroikens, like what's your reasonable time frame where you think that's worth it to sell?
What do you mean sell? Like if someone offered me 0.6 ETH, I just don't really.
No. Like you're buying him because you're like, if he blows up, then like you have this great card. You would probably play it. But there are people who buy cards like that because they're like, oh, he'll be good one day. But like, I don't think there's any thought that it could literally take like 5 years for somebody like that to turn out to be great. Yeah. And like Sorare hasn't even been around that long.
No.
Like I don't think people have like a reasonable expectation on time.
True.
And so when you buy cards like that, not only do you need to wait that time in order for the cards to come good, you also can't do anything with the ETH that you spent now or over the next 2 to 5 years because it's tied up in this card.
Yeah, and that's I will say, so here's my thoughts on it too, though. It goes to like the U23 goalies in situations, right? Like it's kind of like a value store where like you're not realistically gonna lose value. Like Stroikens that I paid 0.23 for, like, is that really gonna go down over the next 3 years? Probably not. Like I probably can always recoup at least that much for Stroikens. In the event I want to sell. But like I think that goes into the beauty of Sorare. There's so many different paths for people to approach. Like you and I, and even like me, like I focus heavily on SO5. I still do stuff like that. Like I still buy like a Stroikens type card. But like the idea from people like us is we want to focus on the SO5, and therefore we will sacrifice other things for the SO5. Other people want to buy and trade cards. So like they're going to view Stroikens like I can buy this for 0.2, sell it in 4 months for 0.6, and boom, I smashed it, right? So that's like the nice thing with Sorare. Like, is that our sort of like avenue? No, like that's not what you and I do. That's what other people do. But like that's what makes it great. Like there's tons of options where anyone can go and do that type of stuff. I see another card that I think is a great example on our discussion points, a Demi. I don't understand how a Demi's been his price point that he's been over the last year or so. Like I mean, I'm not saying he's not good and he's not going to be possibly really good, but like this is a guy that I don't see him as a absolute smasher for Dortmund. Like he doesn't have the AA game. His AA is worse than Vlahovic. As a prospect, he's worse than Vlahovic, and yet he's selling at I don't know point or two. He's probably selling at 2-ish right now. 1.8,
Yeah,
1.8.
around there.
Yeah. So like I don't understand why like that card is selling for that much in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree that he belongs on this list. I also
Brones makes up a really good point here too. He just said he's like there's a big difference in investing in speculative super rares than it is in rares and limiteds. And I do agree with that to an extent. Like for me to buy a higher end U23 super rare, it's going to cost me 3 or 4 ETH at least.
sure.
So like if I get that card, great. Like if I want to speculate on a
They're
rare
also really hard
card,
to win.
they're also really difficult to win. Like rares, and they're also really difficult to buy just in general. Like buying super rares is hard. So like it's one of those things that like I don't really care about rares because in my opinion, any rare I realistically need or want outside of Mbappe and Haaland, I can go get. Obviously, like Kimmich, Vinny Jr., like whatever. Everyone else is like, if I really, really, really want them, I can sell a couple things and go make that happen. If there ends up being a card, like if I had a Jota Super, like someone paid like 2 ETH for Jota Super like a month ago. Like it really wasn't that long ago. Like I would have to pay like 10 ETH for that card now at least to get that card. Whereas like the Jota Rare was like 0.6. I could go buy it for 2 now. Like so I can still go buy it if I want to go buy it. Whereas like the Super, it's like, damn, that's going to cost me a freaking arm and a leg to go buy that right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, like, I don't think you could. Yeah, so someone bought. I think the Pires one. No, I saw the Pires one. So like, yeah, you're looking at like a month ago, 2.6. It would cost you at least 10. Like I don't know if anyone would sell it for under 10 right now.
I think that's true.
Yeah, like it's just harder to get super rares than it is to get rares.
Man, that is a jump.
And if realistically, if anyone becomes like an absolute smasher, always better to have them as a super than a rare. Like you can always sell the super, then buy a rare and still have a massive balance after that too, if you want.
Sure.
Like Pires could go sell his Jota for 10, buy a rare for 10.5. He has a 7.5 cushion. The ROI, the actual ROI percentage might be higher in the limiteds or in the rares. Like it might be higher, but the gap in the price points is going to be substantial.
Yeah, I think it's important though to be clear that like it's easier to like see a massive jump on super rares for the elite players. Like you're not going to see that kind of jump for just guys who happen to like get hot. Like the super rare market is fairly illiquid versus rares and and limiteds. And so like just because you have a card that like a guy's doing better, that doesn't mean that there are going to be buyers out there for them. But somebody like Jota obviously is like elite, and so it'll be um, easier to sell that, if you wanted to.
Yeah, so Josh mentions from a pure ROI perspective, usually limiteds is the best. It's most efficient. Usually, not always, but most of the time. Like I would say 90% of the time, limiteds are the most efficient from an ROI perspective. There are occasions where a limited might already be bloated a little bit, and then like let's look at Jota. Well, you look at Jota as an example here. So Jota's rare went from over the last, let's say, month or so, Jota's rare went from 0.45 to like 2.
No,
I'm
not
looking at the wrong Jota. I'm looking at shitty Jota. My bad. I'm looking at Liverpool Jota. We don't want to look at that bum.
I mean, he was 0.6.
Yeah.
What is that? 2 months ago.
So 0.6 to 2.4. So like 4x. His super rare is probably 4x. And his limited, let's see what his limited has gone from 0.075 to 0.45. So yeah, so like his limited 6x compared to 4x of the other two. So usually speaking, I have seen a few where it bucks that trend a little bit, where like one of the others is more a better ROI for whatever reason at that point. Like Stroikens right now, say Stroikens just became a smasher right away. Stroikens limited is at 0.02. Like his limit is probably not going to go to much more than like 0.1, 0.2. So like let's say he would like 7, 8x. If he became a smasher, his super I paid 0.234 would probably go for 2.5 to 3 ETH, which would be like 10x. So it's there are a small amount of situations where that will happen. Most of the time it will be limited as the most effective ROI.
Yeah, I think the important thing with limiteds is you have to recognize that you have to be fast. Like you have to be early because it just takes off without you.
Yeah, the limiteds, like if you aren't like immediate on the bottom of his price point, the grab, like if you missed like right away, you're gonna all of a sudden the price is gonna double and you're not gonna hit that ROI that we're talking about. You're gonna be at like a 4x instead of a 7x. Like it'll be a drastic decrease. So like yeah, limited. The key is being very very fast on buttons.
But I mean, just based on the liquidity, there are many more like opportunities to 6x your money in limited.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, if you had like realistically, I've discussed it. I think there's validity in buying like 5 limiteds instead of 1 rare, and then sell the 5 limiteds, buy a rare eventually if you want, like type of thing. Like it's a good chance that could play out and be worthwhile for you.
Yep, absolutely, absolutely. I'm trying to go back here in our DMs about the other players you had for this list. I feel like the one that you keep going back to that made Vlahovic not so good to talk about doesn't count.
What?
I think the player that you chose where you're like, actually, this guy is the worst.
There's no one worse than this guy. This guy's like the floor of the platform. He's like the dredges. Like if you own this card and haven't sold it, I have no idea what you're doing.
I think
no, Jim, perfect timing. You just waited for Jimmer to show up for this, didn't you? Literally, Jimmer shows up and we just go to the dredges of the platform. Like, all right, so here's the thing. And let's also preface this by saying, because people take us too literally sometimes, I feel, we don't care about how good someone is in real life. Like, we don't. We care about what their production is from an SO5 perspective. I'm making teams for SO5, not actual soccer. So if we say guys suck or they're not very good, it's generally speaking SO5 perspective, because we don't care. Like if you watch Kai Havertz is actually good in real life. Like
yeah,
he's
he is
actually good. And he's like someone you would love to have on your team. But SO5 perspective, he is such a bad card. It is not even funny. And the thing is, so the difference between like him and Vlahovic, he has proven how bad he sucks. He's proven he's terrible. So we'll look at Havertz's score this year. So if we remove all of his sub games this year for Chelsea, and we just look at his Chelsea return from this season, we're going to see how lovely his scores are. Look at this. He has cracked 83 times in like, that's not even 40 games. Is that 40?
56 games.
56 games. He has cracked 83 times. He has an AA of 4.2. Like he literally. So this is the problem with
It's
him.
actually worse than I thought it was. But.
It's terrible. It was worse than I thought it was too. That's how bad he is. I actually looked at him the other day, and it was like way worse than I thought. So half of the time he obliterates your lineup. 45% of the time he doesn't kill your lineup and just keeps it afloat with like a 60. And then 3% of the time he gets you a good score.
So for the record, like what you're looking at, these are just his starts.
Yeah, these are just his starts. This doesn't even include the heavy amount of sub-in games that he has, which is a lot. So you're talking like this guy is just an absolute turd box. And the thing is so he like has no chance of success at Chelsea. If it was a forward card, David, it would be okay because you're more willing to like take risks as a forward. But we're looking at the midfield, which all of his cards are midfield cards. So there's no forward cards of his.
I don't think it changes much, to be honest. Like his forward scores are not as good. They are 21 between 30 and 40 out of 50.
But you're more willing to take a risk at a forward than you are a midfielder.
Sure.
But yes, the card still sucks as a forward. But like, so yeah, we're looking like this card is 0.9 ETH. He is literally like, we're talking like if you own this card, you literally should play it 0% of the time. Like he should literally never be in consideration almost ever. And that's how bad of a card it is. So like people are literally paying 0.9 for this card. Like people paid 2 ETH for this card at one point. Like what is going on? Like this just makes no sense. Andy Black, like there's your point. There's our good example. Like
here's our boy.
Paid 2 ETH for this card that is literally the worst card in my opinion on the platform in terms of production and cost. No card is better. Now I will say he has one potential win if he goes to Bayern and plays in like the Muller role. That is his one chance to be like a 55 to 60 average player that is a legit guy you can play. But he's not on Bayern now, and I haven't heard any rumors of him going to Bayern anytime in the near future. Techers, I read your mind. But it's just...
I think one of the things that pushes his price up is scarcity, and that there are just not that many Havertz cards.
It doesn't matter. His price.
No, it does matter because people don't necessarily want them, and so so it's like they don't sell, but people are like, no, I paid a lot for this card, so I'm just going to keep the floor high, and so like nobody's going to sell this card for 0.3.
No, but someone actually paid like 0.8 recently. Like when was the 0.8 buy?
Right. But I'm saying like I don't think, when was this? Yesterday.
Someone was dumb enough to buy that card yesterday. I apologize if you're listening to the stream. I won't call you a moron because that offends some people. But I mean, if you paid 0.84 for this card yesterday, I don't know what the fuck you're doing.
I think I don't know why you do it.
Well, I just don't know how you come to that type of decision. Like, I don't know how you buy this card. Like, I don't know how you own this card. Like, I mean, so for those that like get offended by me calling people morons, I have called Jimmer and Black a moron multiple times for this card. They have their own private chat that I can't post in, that you have to own a Kai Havertz to post in, just because they wanted it. Let me just say, there's not very many posts of him being productive in there, and that chat is relatively quiet because he is terrible. Really, me bashing him is great because it forces Jimmer to play him, because Jimmer plays him just because he wants to like brag that he played him, and then like the next year he didn't say anything bad about him because he was so bad all year he didn't get a chance.
Yeah, I think if you are looking to buy him now, I think the simple response is like there are probably better players, better performing cards.
Okay, so here's a question. It's not even performing card. This card's not playable. Not playable. So like,
I'm saying, if you're thinking like I'm going to go buy a Kai Havertz, we're going to say like there are better players, better cards you can buy with that money.
Also, here's a betting advice for people. If you want to bet, go bet that he's going to score for the German national team next game, because we're shit talking him here. So go get a bet in on like his goal scoring odds in the the next game. But like that's the point. So like I told Jimmer he's not a top 250 midfielder. He's probably worse, but like he produces better. But like I would rather have a Javi Simmons than him. Not close, because I don't know if Simmons sucks. I know Havertz sucks.
Right.
So I said, like, Jimmer's like, there's not 250 people better than Havertz. Pretty much anyone's better than Havertz. Like, if I go find a 13-year-old in the Liverpool Academy, he's better than Havertz, because I don't know if he sucks.
Yeah, that kind of goes back to the Stroikins versus Turkey versus Vlahovic thing. That like we don't.
Yeah, but at least
there's value in not knowing.
Vlahovic is there is value in not knowing. Vlahovic at least is serviceable though. Like
sure.
I don't really care.
I don't want to compare him to Havertz.
How much how much would you pay for a Havertz card?
Me?
Yeah. If it was on the market, at what point would you click?
Yeah, at what point do you just snap by it?
Like, would you buy him if he was 0.1 ETH?
I was going to put it at 0.15.
Would you pay 0.15 for him?
Like
if Jimmer offered you Kai Havertz rare for 0.15, would you buy it? Knowing you can't sell it, like you can't go resell it for 0.8. Like you pay 0.15 and it's like a card that's in your gallery for a while.
Yeah, so like the benefit is that I get into this private Discord that allows you to post when Havertz scores. Like that's the utility for the Kai Havertz card.
Which would never happen. So just
right. I would buy it for 0.1.
Yeah, okay. So you would not buy it for 0.15.
I would probably tell Black to go buy it at 0.15.
Yeah,
and he would.
Yeah, so let's make this clear. Andrew Laird would not buy it at 0.15. I would not buy it at 0.15.
I would probably buy it at 0.15, to be honest.
I would not buy it at 0.15.
I like Joshua said Michael Bradley is better than Kai Havertz.
That's not
Black would love that line at least.
No, that's not even close. Michael Bradley's way better than him. Literally not even in the ballpark. I'm gonna let me just find some players and I'll tell you who's better than Kai Havertz. 1 second.
Well, I think the simple thing is they have it up on the screen here is like just the similar players. Like you're not buying any of these.
No, I don't even need similar players. I'm going to go sort through zeros and find some people's zeros. 1 second. Give me a minute here. I think midfielder U23. Let's see, Laird. Oh, I don't have people that are at 0. I want people that are zeros.
There's a player that I want to talk about that you mentioned that I was surprised that it came up. It was more because I was surprised at his recent scores, because this is a player that like I think everyone considers one of the best, and you were like, there's no way it's worth the money. And then I looked at his scores and I was like, he has struggled a little bit. But you think Mohamed Salah is like way overpriced?
It's not that he's like, I mean, if he's at 7 ETH, yeah, he's overpriced.
No, he's not. We'll call it, 2.5 is the last
one.
I mean, they don't move that often. But.
So here's the thing. I think people are blinded by how many rewards You Never Walk Alone wins with Liverpool stacks. But most of what he's winning with those stacks are because there's not very many games going and because of what the defenders and goalies are putting up. They lower what he needs. Like Salah's L40 is 56. His L15 is 55. You see, he just doesn't fully spike that frequently. Like he's just a pretty mediocre card that I just don't think is that good. It's just not worth the value. Like, I mean, let's call him 3 ETH. Like you could go buy a Neymar. Like I'm definitely buying a Neymar before I'm buying a Salah. Like I just don't think that spending 2.5, 3 ETH for Salah is really worthwhile because you just aren't getting the best card. Like he's not young. Although I will say if he goes to Real, he's going to obliterate because they're just going to score so many freaking goals. But like you got a guy that's turning 30 in 4 days, is not a very good scorer historically. Like he is better if you look at all, he is better, but it's still not like the best player of all time, but he's a 60 AA, right? So like if you think he goes back to like a 60 AA, like he's solid, but again, he's not like a slam dunk, this guy's the best of all time type player. Like he's just solid. And then if you think he's more of a 55, 56 type player, he's like this year, he was really not that great. He just Liverpool played so many midweeks where, like, if you scored 65 and then you ran TAA, Virgil, and Allison, like, they put up 80, so it didn't really matter.
He literally won the Player of the Year yesterday, the Premier League Player of the Year. It's just funny to hear you say like he's not that good. Would you rather pay 2.5 ETH for Salah or Vlahovic?
Vlahovic, probably. Well, but that's what that. That's a good thing we gave the disclaimer on how much we care about real life earlier in the show, Laird, because I don't care about real
That's
life.
A good point.
Also, let's be honest, like, they didn't even include Hyung Sung Myun for all of his stuff, and
Son not making the team of the year was literally insane.
I mean, come on, like if he's not making it, like I don't know what you're really expecting if, like, you don't have Son Heung-min as a top end player in the Premier League this year. Like, the dude was probably the best player in the league. Wasn't even close. He would be a great card to own, but I would love to own his card.
Son?
Yeah.
Yeah. That card bangs.
Sonny had like, look at this. Like, that's a card you want.
I think this is what everybody thinks they're getting with Salah.
I think that's what they're getting to. I think that if he was on the market, I think Salah's card would be more expensive.
You mean Son's?
No, I think Salah's would be more expensive than Son's.
Oh.
But like, I mean, that goes to the whole situation, right? Like, Sonny's clearly a better card. Like, he's a much better card. It's not even close. It's just people are going to view the Liverpool situation and be like, I mean, also here, Tottenham's on a much worse team. Tottenham's a much worse team than Liverpool, and they have a lot less talent. Like, it's literally like Sonny and Kane. Kulusevski was good.
Oh, I was going to say,
in real life,
we're talking about Kulusevski.
In real life, he was really good and really helped them as well this year.
So, I'm trying to see here.
Pires, did you see Pires? Pires, if you're still here, yeah, you were so full of shit earlier when you said that Kulusevski is a good midfield card. Like, I just saw it. I could just picture.
No. He said he would have been a good forward card.
He would have been a good forward card. Kulusevski as a forward card would be good. But Pires, right, he's a good midfield card. Like, I just see Pires, like, sitting there like.
So, Kulusevski is one of them that has become like a bit of a, like, people have been talking about it today because we did Nellis's gallery review last week. Nellis has a Kulusevski super rare that he really likes. And everyone's like, well, Kulusevski's awesome. So, like, he shouldn't dare get rid of that card. And Kulusevski, I think I saw today, and I hate that they do this, but it's every time frame is like an arbitrary time frame. But like in 2022, so basically from January 1st, they were talking about the top decisives, just goal assist decisives in the Premier League. It was like Son, Kane, I forget who was third, and fourth was Kulusevski.
Well, it makes sense.
And I think that the argument for Kulusevski, like, I get it of why you would want him. But I'm still on the side of, like, if I don't want decisive dependent midfielders.
Yeah.
I want midfielders who, when they get decisive, score 80 instead of one decisive, they score 60. I don't want 65 points from one decisive. I want 80. And so Kulusevski just falls in that category. Like, everyone's like, well, he's got like a bunch of 80s, but like, they're literally multiple decisive games. I guess he has this one here where he hit 87, but like, I don't know, we're like slaves to all around scores.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people think we focus on all around scores because we're like, well, if they don't get a decisive, then they still score like 55. And it's like, we're actually more when they do score, we want 85. Like, that's what we want. That's why all around scores are so impressive or so important. It's less about the floor that they provide, which is nice. It's not like we ignore it.
Sure.
But it's like when they get a decisive, you are getting a huge score instead of needing, like, it goes back to Vlahovic. Like, you need a hat trick for him to get to 90. And he might not even get to 90 with that. And so, like, that's why we do it. And Kulusevski's all around is like, okay, but it's not good enough for a midfielder in U23 or Champion Europe.
Right.
It's like, he's literally, I mean,
Well, I mean, a good player that we like that we'll talk about here is like Sangare. Like Sangare last year, this is what Sangare did when he had a decisive. And I'm going to give you the actual numbers, not the and we're talking about like actual decisives, not when he got a red to remove his decisive either. So like if we start from the top here, so he had 85 without a decisive at the end of the season because he did get an assist, but then had a penalty conceded to get a bit away. All right, so against Vitesse, he had 80. Against even we're going to include his international because it's easier to include. In the international game against Algeria, he had 80. The international game against Sierra Leone, he had 80. The game against Vitesse, he had 104. The game against Fortuna Sittard, he had 102. The game against Sparta Rotterdam, he had 115.
Those are single decisive games.
He's averaging with one decisive like 93 points. Now, am I getting it all the time? No. But if I get a decisive 15 to 20% of the time, and that 15 to 20% of the time is always in the 90 to 100, that's huge. That's like a fantastic card. And like that's what you want typically that's what I want generally out of my mids. I don't want to have to ride a guy to get 3 decisives to hit 80.
That's not who I thought you were going to bring up, by the way.
Kaku? Oh, Enzo. Enzo's just the GOAT anyways. But yeah, like look at Enzo. Like Enzo's the same. So you get decisive, you get 122, you get 80, you get 86, you get effectively 92. Let's just pretend he didn't get additional decisives. You get 103.
Like this gave you 122.
Yeah.
0.8.
122 with one decisive. Kulishevsky could have 7 decisives and apparently 122. So like I would much rather rely on a guy to get 1 decisive than a guy to get like 7.
Mm-hmm.
But so that's the whole thing is like I want my guys to spike with 100. I want to know that if they hit their decisive, basically like a guy like Sangare or a guy like what Enzo's done, like 20 to 25% of the time you're going to spike. 60% of the time you're going to keep your lineup alive with a good solid score, and then like 10 to 15% you're going to dust it off. Right. That's fantastic. If you're keeping your lineup alive 85% of the time with a 25% spike rate, that's huge.
So, I mean, we're basically just adding names to a hit list here. So we're just going to keep going. But hopefully we explain it. So we talked about Salah. We talked about Kulusevski. Adeyemi we talked about. I don't really want to go into Rafael Leao because we talked about him last week. But
it's his birthday today, Laird. Did you see that?
Leao's?
It's Leao's birthday today. I don't actually think Leao's bad. I just think he's overpriced.
Well, I think that's generally what this is. Like,
yeah, like some of the Kai Havertz is bad.
Right, like you would never play Havertz. You would probably play Leao.
Aaron, I have not mentioned his name one time in the show. I'm going to see if I can get through the whole show without mentioning it. I haven't mentioned it. Laird has. I have not.
I have, yeah. So
to be fair, I don't even think Leao's price is coming down. Like Leao's trending downward.
Yeah.
But like Leao, at least like if you watch Leao and like you sort of see what Leao does, like I don't know, he gives me at least a chance to be productive compared to some of these other guys. Like if I look at him, I'm a little bit more intrigued. Oh, so Frankie de Jong, yeah, that's a good one. So like again, like I think Frankie de Jong is a fantastic player, but when you look at him, he doesn't spike almost ever. And he doesn't really produce great AA in a lot of the games where he has like some duds. Like you see, there's a lot of like my view of a dud's like 50, like not 55, but like if you're below 55, you're not really getting the job done. In my opinion, like 55 is sort of like the threshold you need. But the issue with Frankie de Jong is even when he gets a decisive, he's not full on spiking. And I don't think he's a bad card, but when you look at Frankie de Jong and he is 1.5 ETH almost, like I just think you could much better spend that money than spend it on Frankie de Jong.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think one of the
I'll give an example. Like so here's a good example. So Milinkovic-Savic is half his price.
Yeah.
And we'll go look at Milinkovic-Savic and we'll see like what he does and what he does when he spikes. And like he has some major spikes and he has a similar score point. But like look at these spikes.
Yeah.
Look at these spikes over the last year or so. 100, 93, 91, 94, 100, 99, 90, 97, 90, 95, 92. In his last 50 games, that's like 890 pluses. Like, yes, he still puts up some of the more turdy type games than De Jong, but like when he hits, he generally smashes and puts up a really big game, which is a great card to have.
I think the thing that keeps De Jong's price high is that I'm trying to see here. I guess he wasn't. Was he U23 last year? May. So he turned 20. So he would have been 24 in May. Yeah. So he would have been U23 until July
of last year.
Yeah.
No.
I think that makes sense, right?
Maybe.
He just turned 25 last month.
I think so. But anyway, yeah. But that was so long ago.
So I think there was some, like, his price was a U23 price. And it was like, oh, he's like, he could be a serviceable U23 midfielder. He's going to be great one day. Like, everyone loved him. He moved to Barca. And like, cards like that tend not to get like that cheap.
Correct.
And so, which like is a positive if you have them, because you're like, the floor is like reasonable. You're not taking a huge loss unless something like catastrophic happens. But it also forces you, if you want the card, to like pay more than it's worth, or pay more than you're going to get out of it, because like the price is just not going to dip. And so like, he's probably just not worth it. Like, go buy SMS.
Yeah, that's the point. Like, I had a De Jong. I wanted De Jong at some point. I sold it. I'll tell you where I sold it for. I have no idea what I even sold it for. I know I brought it in a trade. I think I brought it in a trade. So let me see what I sold it for. I sold it. I was actually one of the higher ones, Laird. I sold it for 1.07.
Wow. Yeah, that's pretty good.
But to be fair, I didn't even think he was that bad when I sold it. Like, I didn't even think he was that bad. And I don't think he's bad. Like, he's not bad. So, like, this is, again, like, this is a different situation than Kai Havertz, who's just bad. There are just better players you can realistically get than him that have a bit higher spikes. Like, you look at all these similar players. Like, I'm not even going to include, like, guys that aren't maybe higher end, but, like, Paqueta, half his price. Odegaard's high, but that's because Odegaard has no supply.
Yeah, I mean, Guendouzi's
love Sorare. I never
actually U23.
Yeah, he is. That is true. But like, yeah, like, you're looking at De Jong. De Jong's 25. Milinkovic-Savic is 27. Well, you get a much better player like Ruiz. Ruiz is a great example. 0.648. So he's like under half the price. Really strong player. Plays on a good team. You see he has a bit more spiking out of him than that of De Jong. Otherwise, pretty similar type of players. So it's really, and to be fair, I will also say with what De Jong's issues are could just be variance. If you add like 2 more or 3 more decisives in, it probably makes his graph a lot more appealing, right?
But everyone's will.
Yeah, but I'm saying, like, it could be a variance thing. Like, maybe De Jong is going to add a few more decisives to his game going forward.
Yeah, somebody I just on this list, it reminded me of. Oh, I know who I wanted to talk about.
Oh,
so
where's Harry Trades? Harry Trades and Nellis. They can both be here for this one.
So I actually, like, I don't know what to make of Kakare. Like, everyone seems to think he's going to be like. Everyone seems to think he's great, and 0.4 for rare is like not a ton, but I don't see anyone winning anything with this guy.
No.
It's like, what is it about him?
I don't know. I don't know. I told Harry not to buy his super rare. I told Nellis not to buy his unique. I don't know. What are you going to get out of him? Like, it's not even, my problem is, like, again, you look at scores, like, scroll down here. Like, what are we looking at for spikes? Like, you have 1 game over 60. You have 2 games over 70 in the entirety, like, of the graph. Like, look at this. Like, where are you going to get spikes from? Like, your spike is 70. Like, that's a hard spike for him, is 70.
Oh, he had a 183, which, yeah, of course, included a decisive.
Yeah, well, I don't know. I just don't see it on Kakare. Like, I don't see any reason to have that card outside of, like, I just really don't have any reason to have it. Unless you think he's going to, I don't know, like, is he going to go to PSG and play and be a 60 average player? I don't know. So, but, like, I mean, it's like, that's so many games that are so mediocre. Like, how many games is that? How many games is there? 100? Like that's like 100 games of like total nothingness.
Yeah, I mean, if you take out like starts, he's at 61. This is like one of those where you're like, as a super rare, it's like not that bad, and then like you start playing the super rare, and you're like, man, this is just not good enough.
I mean, like, what are you gonna do? You're gonna put that super in like D2? It's like a total depth play, right? Like it's like this guy's here and he's gonna start. That's it.
Right.
But like
Right.
you can have other guys that are gonna fill that void.
So there was a comment in chat that said there's like big transfer risk with a lot of these guys that we're talking about. Like the argument that I hear every time about buying U23 players in Champion Europe is that they're already established and you don't have to worry about them moving to a Champion Europe team and just getting buried. And the problem is that those guys are priced, they're already priced as if they're not moving, which is like fine. But they're also not scoring as much as the guys who could move. And so if you can get multiple non-champion Europe guys for the price of one champion Europe, and if one of those guys works out, great. And like you transfer, and I was talking to Pires earlier today about this, and he's like, if you cannot play U23s with the expectation that like you're buying a guy for years. Like obviously they age out as well, but like situations change, and like you cannot buy like an 18-year-old kid's card and expect to like get 6 years out of utility out of it, because it's just not how it works. And so this argument that like, oh, you have to be worried about transfers, and it's like, yeah, but like that's what you have to do if you're playing U23s. You have to be on top of the transfer possibilities. You have to know if there's like one move that's better than the other. Like we know that Coop Miners going to Atalanta probably wasn't going to be a great move. But we also think that if Enzo goes to Benfica, it's a great move. But if he goes to Man United, it's possibly not as good. Like those are the things you think about when you play U23. And I feel like this whole like, I'm going to pay more for the security of knowing that my champion Europe U23 player is going to stay. But you're also paying more for fewer fantasy points. And like the point of the game is to score more fantasy points. And so it's like Nanzo said it on Nellis's So Far So Rare, which is a great listen. Anybody who hasn't listened to that, go check that out. They were talking about stacking. And he was like, well, and they went through like everything about like how good the benefits of stacking. You know, you only have to do research on one team. If you know that team in and out, like you'll know when everybody's going to play. It's easy because they all play together, so it's not like you have these weeks where like only 3 of them are in. And he was like, do you want to save time or do you want to win? And it's like, if I'm buying champion Europe U23 players because I'm worried, because I don't want to have to worry about them moving, then yeah, I just save myself some time and worry. But I'm not going to win. And like, aren't we trying to win? Isn't that the point?
I like to win. The only person I know that doesn't like to win, that doesn't care, is Jimmer. The only person I know that doesn't like try to win, he just
Jimmer like spite wins.
Jimmer like wins by accident because he's like trying to do something funny and accidentally wins is like what Jimmer does. And then he doesn't care because he like was trying to do something funny anyway. Like Jimmer's totally the person that would like play Yuma Obata, and then Yuma Obata gets a start and like rips an 80, and then Jimmer like wins and he's like, but I played Yuma Obata. And then he's like, damn, that was more funny when I was just getting a 0 from him.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I don't know, I'm trying to win. Like, so here's the difference. Like you talk about players going and getting buried. Cacray's buried alive. Like, look at this. Like, this chart is not good enough. He's not producing realistically to get like 50 is not going to cut it. 30 is not going to cut it. Like 60, like, I mean, he gets a 60, great. Like your lineup's alive. Like any more you need to hit 400 to get up higher. Like I don't even like, it's not even talking about like winning a higher end card. Like if you're getting like 45 and 50, like you're not even getting a tier 3 anymore.
No.
Like you need to get a tier 3 anymore, you probably need to average 60 a piece, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like 40 is not cutting it. Like you're not getting it. Like you're not getting a tier 3 with a guy like Cacray in your line most of the time. Or if you are, it's because everyone else outperformed what they were expecting and Cacray just sort of was there.
Right. Yeah. No, I think that's absolutely right. I feel like Cacray scores right now are what people think will happen. Like if Joey Veerman is staying theoretically for this season, but like they're like, oh, if Veerman goes to insert Serie A club And like when he starts playing, like these will be his scores. And it's like, yeah, but at least now I'm getting his peak scores.
Yeah.
Like you don't want to lock in mediocre scores before you have to.
Yeah.
I mean, hopefully you never have to, but like,
true.
That's just like, I recognize the argument of not wanting to worry about where my player is going to go next, but sacrificing good scores to do that just seems nuts to me. If like, you're trying to play
if you want to get a guy like that, you go buy Vinny Sousa, right? Like, or no, I'm sorry, Vinny Jr. You go buy Vinny Jr. and you pay Vinicius Jr. right now is 4 ETH. So like, let's say you don't want to get Jota because you're worried about Jota going and dying. You buy Vinny Jr., you pay 4 ETH for Vinny Jr., you get a guy that produces similarly to Jota that you don't have to worry about. So that extra 2 ETH you're paying is for the not having to worry about him going and rotting on a champ EU bench. But you don't go buy like a guy that's just already terrible. That's like, it's like Kai Havertz and Kaká. Like Kai Havertz is way worse, but like you don't go buy a Kai Havertz and be like, well, he's playing. It's like, I don't care if he's playing. He sucks.
I think the difference is that there's like Vinicius is it. Like you're not like if you're like I'm gonna go buy the champion Europe U20. I mean, obviously Mbappe and Haaland are there, but I feel like they don't even count. But like it's not like you can be like I'm gonna go buy someone like Vinicius. There is nobody else. Like,
no, it's him. It's
him. So like I get wanting to do that, but I was going somewhere else with that and I forget already what it was. But like I don't see it. Speaking of Haaland, is he too much?
I mean, probably. Like, here's the thing: Mbappe's better.
Yeah,
Mbappe's better. He just gets more AA. It all comes down to the AA, right? The AA for Haaland needs to rip. Like, he needs at his price point.
Oops, sorry. Yeah,
55, 60 decisives a season, which could happen at City. Like, it could happen. Like, but 10 ETH. Like, I'm just like, here's the thing for me. If I have 10 ETH, like, I'm just gonna figure out a way to get 12 and get Mbappe.
Yeah, or buy 2 Vinicius Juniors.
Buy 3 Vinicius Juniors, yeah.
Right.
Like, I think Vinny Junior's a pretty decent card to own from that perspective. Like you're taking out the risk on Vinny Jr. By his cards.
Yeah.
But like the mid, like if you look at the midfield, like is what's really there at midfield that has that in it?
I don't think there's any current. I'm going to say this and then I'll probably have to backtrack like immediately. So I'll just pull it up here. But basically like champion Europe U23 midfielders.
Yeah, like I don't even think it really exists.
I mean, they just all have questions. Like Nkunku and Bruno Guimaraes are gone. Pedri could be it if he played. Tchouameni.
It's like Pedri and it's like could be Tonali. Quinny was not happy about the Tonali bashing. I like Tonali. I think he could improve his score. So that's why like a guy like Tonali wasn't included.
Yeah.
But it's like Jude Bellingham and it's like Pedri.
Oh yeah, Jude. Yeah.
Like you'd go by Jude.
Yeah, that was dumb.
But like Jude, the issue is Jude's scoring isn't quite up to what you want it to be at, but it's still really solid. I actually think he has a little room to grow in his scoring as well.
I agree. I'm not sure there's many guys on the platform who have like his kind of like potential upside.
Yeah. Defenders, there's a lot of defenders. A lot of guys that are defenders that sort of fit the bill.
Where do you put, before we go to defender, where do you put Declan Rice in this conversation? Like, I feel like he always gets ignored because there are just so few cards.
He's fine. He just doesn't spike hard.
I feel like every conversation I hear about him, everyone's like, man, but if he could get like, 6 or 7 goals a year, and it's like, why do we think that's going to happen?
Yeah, our DGen friend Scosmo the other day was like, well, I think he can add a lot more decisives in his game. I'm like, I mean, I'm not
like a West Ham supporter too.
I'm not saying he can't, but like in like his last 40 games, he has 1 decisive. He has 2 decisives since December. Like, is he gonna start adding? Is he gonna start adding like 2 a month? I don't. Maybe. Yeah. But in theory, though, if he goes to a better team, he should get more chance at decisives because they will have more of the ball than what West Ham is. So like I like Declan. I don't know. I just don't think he's really fits that bill. There's a lot more defenders like Upamecano, Schlotterbeck.
Yeah, the defender, there are a ton more, yeah.
Ton of defenders. Upamecano. Like instead of buying like a Timber You can buy like an Upamecano, you can buy like a Slaughterback, you can buy a Fofana. I think Fofana is probably pretty cheap right now compared to what he should be.
Was Fofana the one? There was some ridiculous video going around from some Man United like fan video talking about how they wouldn't pay $8 million for Fofana instead of the 80 that Leicester want.
And that's hilarious because
there are a ton of defenders.
Yeah, Batashili, like just a lot of defenders that make sense that have the.
Tapsoba's like kind of cheap.
Yeah, but he wasn't like locked in at the start of the year, but then he was at the end of the year. I'm just giving the more elite like level guys.
I mean, he's as locked as Upamecano was.
Yeah, but Upamecano is a lot better.
Sure, but he's also 8x the price.
Correct.
Yeah, I don't know, but like that's not the argument we have against U23s from Champion Europe, but like if you want elite scores, getting Champion Europe mids and forwards just seems silly because they're like they don't score well enough. So the problem is that, and it goes right back to Vlahovic, like they don't score well enough for U23s or Champion Europe. Like you're choosing like the two highest scoring divisions, and you're like, let me just pay more for fewer fantasy points.
Correct. Which just typically doesn't make sense.
Usually that doesn't work out.
Circling back to Vlahovic, right? Like you just buy like a Jesper Karlsson and then you buy someone else if you want the production from this individual year type of thing.
Right. Oh wait, I'm already here. Right. Yeah. So again, it's like it's not that we think Vlahovic is bad. Although I keep scrolling looking for him. Where do you think he shows up?
I forget how low he is.
This is L15 though, which is probably more accurate for his.
His L15 was pretty terrible. It was like 50, so you're gonna have to scroll.
69th in terms of U23 forwards behind Noah Lyon.
I don't think he's that bad. I think he's better. Like Kai Havertz. Like Kai Havertz would show up at like 140, and I would be like, he's way worse than 140. Vlahovic isn't as bad as that.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah. Okay. I think we've bashed enough players today.
Limited Pro should exist. Hopefully, it would make sense for it to exist in the future.
For somebody who has a bunch of Liberty cards.
Rafa G. I love Rafa G from like an actual. I love Rafa G because of DFS, not because.
Yeah. He's a terrible. I would assume he's one that's like
terrible.
Oh, I guess he's not.
I've looked at him before. He's not good. He's not terrible. He's like really mediocre. Like that's another thing I think people do, right? Like people will spend ETH on cards like this. There's really just no point in spending on a card like this. You are better either not spending or saving and then buying a better card than actually buying a card like this. Because this card is not very usable at any way for anyone really. And like 0.289, like if you don't buy 3 players like this, all of a sudden you have like a 0.9 ETH card that you can buy that's actually pretty valuable.
Right.
He's had spikes in the past. Like, I mean,
sure.
I like him. I've always been a fan of him because DFS days. But
right, because DFS, yeah. But the thing he does well in DFS is what makes him not as great for Sorare.
Correct.
Literally, that exact thing. So.
Correct.
Oh well. All right, I think we'll cut off there. As always, thank you very much to everybody who has joined us live. It's always great to have this conversation kind of evolve based off of your comments. So they're always welcome and appreciated. If you guys wouldn't mind hitting the like button, if you're watching on YouTube, if you are watching or listening on Spotify, if you could rate and review it, or if you're listening somewhere else, if you guys wouldn't mind rating and reviewing as well, that's always helpful. I'll be back early next week with Andy for another Sorare Andrews. If you guys haven't checked out this week's episode, we talked all about trading with Gator Guy 231, about night and season and so forth. And Sean and I will be back next Friday for another strategy show. So thanks for that, and good luck, everyone.